Welcome to Mary Greeley's Primetime Alive presentation, Understanding Alzheimer's and Dementia. I'm Wendy D'Amato, and I help coordinate the Primetime Alive program. As a reminder, if you would like more information about Primetime Alive or how to join, please visit our website, mgmc.org/PTA. Well, before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to have Megan Benzing, who is a program specialist with the Iowa chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, say a few words.
Hello, everyone. My name is Megan Benzing. I'm a program specialist with the association. I have been with the association since May, and my job entails getting education programs and support groups out into our community, and I do this by working with some of our trained volunteers who are just absolutely amazing. Today, who our speaker is going to be, she's a community educator with our association. Her name is Denise Cleaver. And without further ado, I'm going to
do a little introduction.
Okay, I'm going to hand it back to Wendy.
Okay, as Megan said, our presenter is Denise Cleaver, and Denise has been an occupational therapist in Iowa for over 41 years in physical rehabilitation and geriatrics. Denise's special interest is in geriatric dementia, and she provided direct OT service and consulted in many Iowa facilities. Denise was the program director for the Occupational Therapy Assistant Program at Indian Hills Community College in Ottumwa, and served as a lab assistant and coordinator for the Occupational Therapy Doctorate Program at Drake University. Denise has personal experience as a caregiver to a family member with dementia. Please welcome Denise.
And this program is presented by the Alzheimer's Association. And as was alluded to earlier, I'm a community educator. I think I've been community educator for, about 2 years. I just retired. So when I was full-time at Drake, I didn't get to do it as much as I wanted to. So now that I'm retired, I'm excited that I can maybe get out there a little bit more. The local office in West Des Moines on 28th Street is the Iowa chapter for the Alzheimer's Association. And as I was introduced, I have a expertise, I hope, in geriatrics and Alzheimer's and dementia. I worked in physical rehab, and I tell students that I've worked in every nursing home in Iowa, which isn't true, but it kind of is, because I traveled and did a lot of programming and treatment with patients. And then on the other side of it, my dad has Alzheimer's, and I think he was diagnosed about 7 years ago. So I'm seeing the other side of it, which is even more enlightening and helps me with some of the stories and some of the things that have happened in our journey with Alzheimer's. So this program is designed for those of you who are interested in learning more about Alzheimer's and other dementias. You're going to see dementia experts speaking and perspectives from individuals who are living with dementia and who are care partners. Care partners, I have to get used to that term. Care partners is a term that many people prefer over caregivers. I'm used to saying caregivers, so if I say that. But care partner is maybe a little bit more comfortable for people who are in the early stages of Alzheimer's, where they may not need as much assistance from others, but still benefits from the support of family and friends. All right, so I'd like to know how many of you have a personal connection to or are living with Alzheimer's or another dementia. And you can put it in the chat so that I can kind of see what brings everybody to this. And we're going to learn a little bit more about Alzheimer's and other dementia. So we're going to move right ahead and we'll talk about what we're going to do. Okay, so we're going to compare Alzheimer's and dementia. We're going to recognize how Alzheimer's disease affects the brain. We're going to list risk factors of Alzheimer's disease and identify the 3 stages of the disease. We're going to look at current FDA-approved treatments that can address some of the symptoms of the disease. We're going to talk about what scientists are working on to advance research. And then we're going to talk about the resources available through the Alzheimer's Association. Alzheimer's, seems like you hear more and more about that as the years have gone on. It's a global crisis, and you might have it in your personal lives or know someone that has Alzheimer's disease, or you see it on the news. So let's think about a little bit, see what you know about the impact of Alzheimer's in the United States. We're going to do a little test of knowledge. So let's think about this one. Approximately, how many Americans are currently living with Alzheimer's? Over 3 million? You think it's more than 6 million? About 8 million? Or about 11 million? And the correct answer is more than 6 million. Barring the development of a medical breakthrough to prevent or cure Alzheimer's, this number is projected to reach nearly 13 million by the year 2050. Worldwide, an estimated 50 million people are currently living with the dementia. And these numbers come from Alzheimer's disease facts and figures. That's an annual report that they put together, and that's something that you can certainly get online and look at that through the Alzheimer's Association. Let's try another question. How many Americans provide unpaid care for people living with Alzheimer's or other dementia? What do you think about this one? About 8 million? Over 11 million? Over 14 million? Or more than 18 million? And the answer is more than 11 million Americans are providing unpaid care for Alzheimer's. And it impacts caregivers both at home and at work. More than 80% of the care provided at home is delivered by family members, friends, or other unpaid caregivers. Over half of the employed caregivers report having to go into work late, having to take time off, or having to quit altogether due to caregiver demands. These caregivers provide approximately 15.3 billion hours of care last year, valued at $257 billion. So you can see that this disease impacts not only the individual, but their families and their care partners and caregivers, and it also has a huge financial impact. I know that my brothers and I spend a lot of time on the telephone working through solutions and getting things set up that we don't even keep track of besides going to doctor's appointments and doing those kinds of things. So now we're going to watch a little video about the facts. So as you can see, you can go on to the Alzheimer's Association website and get information. So you may hear the words Alzheimer's and dementia, and sometimes they're used interchangeably. They're related, but they're different. So in this next section, we're going to discuss both Alzheimer's and dementia and how they're related. But first, let's see what you know already. So, Alzheimer's is a normal part of the aging process. True or false? And the answer is false. Alzheimer's disease is more than memory loss. It's a progressive and fatal disease that kills nerve cells and tissues in the brain, affecting an individual's ability to remember, think, plan, and ultimately function. All the time, right? As we get older, at least I've found that I forget things and lose things, and I have to write things down more. But that's more from memory loss than Alzheimer's. Let's look at the next one. True or false? What do you think? People younger than age 65, can they get Alzheimer's? Yes, they can. While most individuals living with the disease are older adults, people younger than 65 can also develop Alzheimer's. This form is usually known as younger onset Alzheimer's or early onset. In some cases, people can develop Alzheimer's as young as being in their 40s or 50s. So we're going to watch a video from an expert explaining now Alzheimer's and dementia and how they are related.
Dementia is the umbrella term for an individual's changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. There are many possible causes of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Other causes of dementia are vascular dementia, which is marked by changes in the blood flow in the blood vessels in the brain. Dementia with Lewy bodies, identified by specific brain changes throughout the brain that include the buildup of a protein known as alpha-synuclein. And frontal temporal dementia, which is marked by brain cell loss in the front sections of the brain or the frontal lobe. Each type of dementia may have distinct characteristics to cause specific behaviors in the individual. But there is also some overlap in behaviors among the types of dementia.
So there are numerous types of dementia. Each of them has different causes and symptoms. And the ones that were listed are just a few in the classifications. So it's so important that you get an accurate diagnosis.
Certainly having the diagnosis of Lewy body was helpful in our planning because we began to understand where this was coming from in the brain, where otherwise we would not have known. Like we knew something was happening, but what was it? To give it a label actually helped, although it was a big umbrella. It explains some of the characteristics and symptoms that we were experiencing and seeing.
And from a personal standpoint, I think that getting an early diagnosis is very helpful. I know that it really helped that we got early diagnosis because then it helped us and our dad plan for the future while he still was able to do it. So he guided us with the financial things that he wanted, the other things that he wanted, and we were really allowed to get things in place so we wouldn't have this mad scramble at a moment's notice where we needed to make decisions, or we want to honor our dad's wishes. So it's super important, I think, and very helpful to family members to get an accurate and early diagnosis.
Certainly, having the diagnosis of Lewy body was helpful in our planning
did that one.
because we began to
All right. Some other decisions too that were easier for us was talking about the living environment plans, discussion about when to stop driving, which is a super important one, and to figure out what other methods of transportation were going to be available to us. And then also some of what I call, as a therapist, activities of daily living, things that we could put in place so my dad could begin to learn them a little bit while he still had those capabilities. For example, like figuring out what system that we could put in place so that he could call for help, like if his wife fell or something. So what kind of a system and how we could practice that with him to help him be able, hopefully, to remember that a little bit longer into the progression of the disease. All right, so dementia is a general term for a collection of symptoms that are severe enough to interfere with daily life. Alzheimer's is the most common cause of dementia. Alzheimer's is not a normal part of aging. It is a progressive brain disease. Next, we're going to take a look at what goes on in the brain when Alzheimer's disease is present.
More than 100 years ago, Dr. Alice Alzheimer's described specific changes in the brain, what we call the formation of plaques and tangles. Now, Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disease that's marked by these key changes and is thought to impact memory, thinking, and behavior. The brain has three main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Each one plays a role in how the body functions. The cerebrum fills up most of your skull. It is part of the brain most involved in remembering, problem-solving, thinking, and even feelings. There are about 100 billion nerve cells, or neurons, throughout the brain that transmit messages in order for us to create memories, feelings, and thoughts. Alzheimer's disease causes nerve cells to die, which leads to the brain tissue loss, or what we call shrinkage, and causes loss of function and communication between cells. These changes can cause the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, such as memory loss, problems with thinking, planning, behavioral issues, and even at the end stages, problems with swallowing.
So plaques are abnormal clusters of protein fragments that build up between nerve cells. So they kind of clog up the ability to pass messages in the brain. Tangles are made up of twisted strands of another protein. And scientists aren't really sure about what causes cell death and tissue loss in Alzheimer's brain as it shrinks, but plaques and tangles seem to be the prime suspects with that. So now we're going to talk about risk factors. Everyone with a brain is at risk of developing Alzheimer's disease, but there are a few known factors that increase a person's risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. Let's see what we can find out about this. Whoops. I get ahead of myself here. Oh, that was right. All right. So here's a question. What's the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's disease? Do you think it's genetics, family history, or age? The right answer is age. As mentioned, these are all known risk factors. However, age is the greatest known risk factor.
Alzheimer's disease is marked by specific brain changes that result in the clinical changes in individual experiences. That is, changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. And ultimately, Alzheimer's is fatal. The exact cause for these changes is unknown, but there are some hints as to what may contribute to an individual's risk. Age is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's. And when we look at populations of people, we see an increased risk over the age of 65. However, Alzheimer's is not normal aging. Family history is also a known risk factor. Research has shown that those who have a parent or a sibling with Alzheimer's are more likely to develop the disease, and that risk increases if more than one family member has Alzheimer's. When we talk about the genes involved in Alzheimer's, there are two categories that could potentially be involved: risk genes and deterministic genes. Risk genes increases an individual's risk for developing the disease, but does not guarantee that they will develop Alzheimer's. Deterministic genes, which are rare for Alzheimer's, guarantee that the person will develop the disease.
In addition to main risk factors for the general population, Hispanics, African Americans, and women are at higher risk for Alzheimer's. Research shows that older Hispanics are about 1.5 times as likely as whites to develop Alzheimer's and other dementias. African Americans are about twice as likely to develop the disease as whites, and almost 2/3 of Americans with Alzheimer's are women. We know that women tend to live longer than men, making them more likely to develop Alzheimer's. However, longevity and lower death rates can only partially explain this difference. So researchers are exploring how genetic differences between men and women may impact disease risk. So just to recap, age is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's, increases risk at the age of 65 and up. Family history is a known risk factor. Having a parent or sibling with the disease increases the risk. Risk genes are two types of genes associated with Alzheimer's, and Hispanics, African Americans, and women are at an increased risk for Alzheimer's. So some things that you might be wondering about is, how do I know if I have the gene? I think about that once in a while. And genetic tests are available to see if someone carries the risk or the deterministic genes. However, health professionals are not currently recommending routine testing for Alzheimer's disease. And it's a very personal decision, and that's something that you should seek the advice from your doctor of whether or not you should get genetic testing. And remember that what's the difference between genetics and family history? While genetics study biological, that is the genes that you do have or you do not have, family history also takes into account environmental, social, economic, and lifestyle factors that we know might affect the risk. Now, I don't know if you remember or not, but I do remember in the 60s and 70s, they were talking about aluminum cans and pots and pans, and they were saying that there was a concern about exposure by using aluminum in everyday sources such as cooking with the pans, even antiperspirants, if you remember that too. However, since then, studies have failed to confirm any role of aluminum in causing Alzheimer's. Experts today are focusing on other areas of research, and few believe that everyday sources of aluminum pose as any threat. Now, kind of the other one that you hear out there, in fact, I think I've seen something on TV recently about this. Can coconut oil help Alzheimer's? This is based on a theory that the neuron cells are unable to use sugar to produce energy properly, and the theory is that coconut oil may act as an alternative energy source. But there's really not enough scientific evidence at this point to suggest that this is an effective treatment for Alzheimer's. So what we do know is that it involves progressive brain cell failure, but we don't know the reason why that happens. Like other chronic conditions, experts believe that Alzheimer's develops as a result of a complex multiple factors rather than just one cause. The next thing we're going to talk about is stages of Alzheimer's disease. No two individuals experience the symptoms and progression of Alzheimer's disease in the same way. So let's hear from another expert on why this is the case, and also listen to some people describe what it's like to live in the early stage of Alzheimer's.
One of the things that impacts our brain is all the other things that can happen to us as we age. And we know that Alzheimer's, the most common risk factor for getting Alzheimer's disease is age. But we also have lots of other things that go wrong with us as we age. And so how those other health factors impact our brain can also impact how Alzheimer's presents in other people.
So what does living with Alzheimer's feel like?
It's a different kind of forgetting. It really, really is. It's not just forgetting where I put my car keys. It's much deeper than that. And for example, I cannot read a book. I used to be a voracious reader because by the time I turn a page, I have forgotten what I had read. And if you're reading a novel, you have to know what transpired before in order for you to continue to read on. And so I can't read a novel, so I've even stopped trying.
Losing the words.
Math, I can't do a simple tip anymore. You know, I sit there, I stare at it. It's crazy what numbers I can't deal with anymore. And in some ways, that's the disease to me. The other thing that I've increasingly been struggling with are words, which I've dealt with words my entire life, you know, as an avid reader, as a reporter, as a writer. I struggle with them now.
Facing the frustration.
I'm like an overachiever. And when you're unable to deliver or you're not performing at the same pace that you once did before, that's frustrating. It's frustrating to not know where you place things. It's frustrating to not be able to explain to someone the problems that you're having. You can't articulate it in a way. It's frustrating to read something and you forgot what you read. It's frustrating to continuously have to change your password and you just changed it last week and you're constantly doing the same thing over and over again.
And what does it feel like living for today?
I think the thing that surprises me the most about my dementia is that it is progressive, and I'm finding that I'm forgetting more. And they do memory tests for me all the time at the doctor, and so that becomes a little disconcerting at times. To see my cognitive impairment continue to decline. But again, I really have hope. I don't live really in the future. I can't live in the future. I can't worry about what the future is going to bring. I have to live for today.
Alzheimer's affects everyone differently. As a result, it's difficult to place a person in a specific stage of the disease. However, there are 3 general stages that are commonly referred to as early, middle, and late stage Alzheimer's. In a medical context, you may hear these stages referred to as mild, moderate, and severe. In the early stage of Alzheimer's, an individual may be able to function independently. However, they may start noticing more frequent memory lapses. Friends and family may also begin to notice difficulties in the person, and a healthcare provider may be able to detect problems in memory or concentration by conducting a detailed medical interview. Middle stage Alzheimer's is typically the longest stage and can last for many years. Damage to the brain cells can make it difficult to express thoughts and perform routine tasks, and this can lead to increased feelings of frustration and anger. In the final stage of the disease, an individual loses the ability to hold a conversation, control their movements, or respond to the environment around them. Cognitive skills, that is, their memory, thinking, and reasoning skills, continue to decline, and this can lead to personality changes and need for round-the-clock care.
So, 3 stages of Alzheimer's disease: early, middle, and late, sometimes referred to as mild, moderate, and severe in the medical documentation and context. No 2 individuals experience the symptoms and progression of Alzheimer's disease in the same way. And while symptoms worsen over time, people progress through stages at different rates as their abilities change. I know it's frustrating for my dad. He's a very social person, and he now, first of all, being locked in his room with COVID, like all of us, not being able to see people, but also his disease has progressed that he cannot, he's more quiet. He doesn't join the conversation. He listens, but he doesn't talk as much as he used to. And it's frustrating for him sometimes when he can't think of the words. So now let's look at the FDA-approved treatment for symptoms. Current drugs help address symptoms but do not treat the underlying cause of the disease. So, what do you think about that one? True or false? This is true. While many medications do not stop the damage of Alzheimer's and its ability to disrupt brain cells, they may help lessen or stabilize symptoms for a limited amount of time.
There are currently several drugs that are FDA approved to treat the cognitive symptoms associated with Alzheimer's disease. They treat the symptoms, but they don't treat the underlying cause. So eventually people will progress, but they do treat some of the symptoms and help people for a time. So the first class of drugs are cholinesterase inhibitors. These drugs work to prevent the breakdown of acetylcholine, which is a chemical messenger found in the brain that's associated with learning and memory. There are 3 FDA-approved drugs that are in this class of drugs. There's Aricept, there's Exelon, and there's Razidine. There's another class of drugs that modulates glutamate, which is another chemical messenger in the brain that's associated with learning and memory. And this drug is called Namenda. And then there's a final class, which is actually a combination of cholinesterase inhibitors and glutamate modulator, and this is called Namzaric.
So these are the 3 types of drugs that are approved by the FDA to manage Alzheimer's symptoms. These treatments only address some of the symptoms of Alzheimer's in some people, and they do not treat the underlying cause of the disease. And if you've been doing some research, you know that the Alzheimer's Association has spent millions of dollars on research. I think we've all kind of learned through COVID what the process is to make treatments and drugs available. And you have to develop them and do the research and do large-scale trials. And researchers are continuing to look for new treatment strategies and advocate for more federal funding for Alzheimer's research. In the last decade, researchers have made enormous strides in understanding how Alzheimer's disease affects the brain. Many recent insights point toward promising new strategies for treatment, prevention, and diagnosis.
This is an incredibly exciting time in Alzheimer's and dementia research. The advancements that we've made in the last decade to understand the disease as a continuum, meaning that the biological changes are starting a decade or more before someone is experiencing the changes in the memory and thinking. This sets the stage for possible prevention. The idea that when we have the tools to identify those individuals at the earliest time point, and when we have the interventions to target individuals at that earliest time point, we can intervene to stop or slow the progression of the disease before an individual loses their memories.
A lot of hope does come from the Alzheimer's Association, all the research that is being done. Even though there is not a cure today for the disease, I know in my heart there is going to be a cure one day, and I know we're getting closer for that cure. Because even if you fail in a research study, you learn from that failure in the research study. That failure always brings progression.
It's nice to see the association spearheading in many ways the emphasis on getting the money at the federal level and at the private sector to get the research done so that someday there will be an effective treatment, hopefully cure, hopefully prevention.
It's more important than ever for people to participate in clinical studies. The fact is, right now, we don't have an effective treatment to stop Alzheimer's disease. And if we don't have people participating in clinical trials, we never will. And so participating in a clinical study is one way that everyone can get involved in a very direct way in the fight against Alzheimer's disease. And for people who currently have dementia or Alzheimer's disease, there are some additional benefits. You get access to very close medical care. You also may be among the first people to have access to the treatments that will eventually prove to work.
Sometimes you hear the phrase, it's a failed trial. That means that it didn't hit the endpoint, it didn't achieve an FDA-approved drug. But I would say as a scientist, the only failed trial is one that doesn't give you valuable information. And if the trial is well designed, if it is a good scientific experiment, you get extremely valuable data so that you can plan the next trial and do the next study even better than the last one. And it gets you that much closer to that FDA-approved drug, to that effective treatment, and maybe someday even a cure.
Currently, more than 5 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's. By participating in clinical research, you can move us toward methods of treatment and prevention for all those affected by this devastating disease. Alzheimer's Association Trial Match is a free clinical studies matching service for those with dementia, caregivers, and healthy volunteers. To start, simply create a confidential user profile and receive a list of studies that may be a match for you. Don't just hope for a cure, help us find one.
So just a recap of that, scientists have increased their understanding of Alzheimer's significantly over the past decade. people living with dementia, caregivers, and healthy volunteers without dementia are needed for clinical studies in order to find methods of prevention, treatment, and ultimately a cure. Both drug and non-drug studies are taking place across the country and online. Trial Match is a free clinical studies matching service. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the Alzheimer's Association. So the mission that Alzheimer's Association leads the way to end Alzheimer's and all other dementia by accelerating global research, driving risk reduction and early detection, and maximizing quality care and support. And of course, the vision is a world without Alzheimer's and all other dementia. So these are key resources. I cannot tell you how many times people have told me stories about using the Alzheimer's Association for all sorts of issues and feeling relieved that there was someone there. I remember somebody in a support group saying that it was the middle of the night and there was a crisis with his wife. And I don't remember what it was, but and he was just at his wit's end. And 24/7, that helpline was there, and he called somebody. And he got some suggestions, but he just had somebody in the middle of the night to talk to say, oh my gosh, you know, I'm just losing it here. How can I help my wife? Things online, super important. Easy access, as we've all found out during COVID after we've learned the technology. All sorts of information is available out there, and in communities nationwide. The support groups are wonderful. My dad attended support groups. He loved them. You know, what's that saying about something about walking in the same shoes as other people? I mean, everybody there was able to share stories and solutions, and they met a lot of nice people in the support groups that they joined. And there's ways to join the fight. So here's ways you can get involved. By volunteering. Whether you can spare a few hours a week or make a more significant time commitment, consider volunteering with the Alzheimer's Association. You can do what I do as a community educator, or you can be on a committee. I mean, it's just what you have time to do. But that's a fun way to meet a lot of people and make a difference. Advocacy. Become an Alzheimer's Association advocate and speak out on behalf of the needs and rights of those facing Alzheimer's disease. I know a couple years ago, because I was in Des Moines, close to the Capitol, I was able to go and speak to legislature about the needs and rights of people with Alzheimer's, and they were very interested to talk to the people that were there. Trial match. Everyone can help advance research by participating in clinical trials, and that's something that the Alzheimer's Association can help you with the matching service. And another fun one is to walk to end Alzheimer's. They're held annually in more than 600 communities. The Alzheimer's Association Walk to End Alzheimer's is the world's largest fundraiser to fight the disease. Register today to raise awareness and funds to benefit Alzheimer's care, support, and research. You can walk as an individual. You can walk as a family. It's just a fun way to honor and support the people that you love and care about, and also just to support all people with Alzheimer's. And then the longest day. the day with the most light, the summer solstice. This is a day to raise funds and awareness for the care and support and research efforts of Alzheimer's Association through an activity of choice. And the website is there so you can investigate those. And there is the 800 number and the website that you can go to. And we'll take any questions that people might have.
Okay. Anyone want to submit some questions? Well, Denise did a great job of explaining all of it.
Apparently so. Well, that's good. You know, and don't be afraid also to ask the physician if maybe your loved one can benefit from therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, whatever possible. There's lots of solutions to problems and ways to figure out how to stay as long as you can in your home. There are OTs, occupational therapists in the area that can help with the driving situations and provide testing for being able to decide whether or not a person can drive. So there's lots of resources out there. You just have to keep asking questions and going to the Alzheimer's Association to get those answers and where you need to go. Well, thank you. I wish you were all in person because I don't really like to do this virtually because I like to see people. But it's been a pleasure to present to you today and enjoy hopefully cooler weather in the next couple days.
Well, thank you, Denise, and also for Megan's support. So you spent a lot of time preparing this and presenting the program. It was very thorough. I would like to remind everyone of our upcoming Primetime Alive programs. Our next program will be the second one in our three-part series on Alzheimer's, 10 Warning Signs of Alzheimer's, and that will be presented virtually on Thursday, September 9th at 2 p.m. Our other program in September is ISU Wellbeing and Exercise Laboratory, Current Work, and COVID Data. That's on Wednesday, September 29th at 2 p.m. So I still didn't see any questions come up. So we thank you all for joining us today. Bye-bye.